Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest today is Susan Ashford, excuse me. I will tell you all about Susan Ashford in just a moment. Grace Under Pressure is that show that focuses on what's too often dismissed as the soft stuff, the caring, the commitment, compassion leaders show for others. And when you exert it on behalf of others to bring people together for common cause, we call that Grace Under Pressure. Welcome, Susan Ashford.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. I want to tell folks all about you. Sue, as she prefers to be called, is the professor of management and organizations at the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. She was previously at Tuck, and she has a brand new book, which is exactly right for our time. It's called The Power of Flexing. Sue's is a relentless researcher, and so all of her conclusions come from not just experience, but hardcore research. She has a heavy academic background. Her research has been summarized and published in Harvard Business Review and many other sources. She's a distinguished professor. She's been recognized by the American Management Association and a whole bunch more stuff. Sue Ashford, welcome to Grace Under Pressure.
Thank you. Happy to be here. I love your theme. We all need more of that.
Well, thank you. So anyway, you talk about changing mindsets. For people like me, that's near impossible. So how do I do this, Susan?
Well, first of all, recognizing that there are alternative mindsets, that the one you've grown up with and used forever and earned some success from may not be your only option. So psychologists tell us that there's one, which is called a performance prove mindset, which is we are going to show the world that we're better than that person sitting next to us and the person sitting on the other side. And that mindset has gotten us through school, gotten us into good colleges, gotten us through college, gotten us good jobs. But the problem is, as life gets more complicated and the problems get bigger and there's more uncertainty, it's a very fragile mindset whenever there's a setback or a failure. Those people tend to crumble a little bit. It has a close cousin called a performance avoid mindset. And
that I think I can do.
Well, mostly you're just fixated on avoiding failure.
Okay.
And those people are especially undone by any failure. The alternative is what Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset. Other people have called a learning orientation. And this is the idea that your abilities can grow and that experiences throw at you opportunities for that growth. And your goal is to learn as much as you can from each of them so that you can do better in the future. And so just knowing there's an alternative can help you to move towards the latter and maybe give up the former that are maybe your habits from our school system, for one.
Great. Well, there's some wonderful background material on your book, The Power of Flexing. I'm just going to read it here for a second because it said flexing gives you the roadmap for how to learn the most from your situations, being an organization, community group, or even a family. So, and it's a journey, a process. So and then you set a goal, and once that goal is set, you run experiments. What would be an example of an experiment, Sue?
There's a million and one. And really, you hit on what the core of why I use the word flexing, because that word basically captures that we don't have to go at life as if there's one formula. It works for everybody. I can teach you the formula for exactly how you need to act. We know life is more random than that and more uncertain, and there are more variables. So flexing is really about trying some things out in your settings, see what works, learn from your experiences, keep what works, discard what doesn't, etc. So experiments are the way you get there. So it could be anything. It really depends on what your goal is. So if your goal is to be more approachable, for example, as one person that I talked to, that was their goal. And if that's your goal, you could try speaking last rather than speaking first. You could try smiling more. You could try asking other people for their opinions. You could try seeking out other people before they come to you so that they know you're a nice person and approachable. So whatever you try, you just take on a few experiments, you try them out,
Yeah.
what happened, drops.
Well, Sue, you're speaking my language because you sound like an executive coach, but I think you're more evolved than the rest of us. These are the exact kind of things we do in coaching. But what's interesting about this, and I love the word experiment, because when I hear mindset and you tell me I want you to change it, my back goes up or I get defensive. But then you say, experiment, just try something. And I love that concept. So,
yeah. And actually, your comment about coaching, one of the chapters in the book was really relied on two really good executive coaches who talked about how they use this methodology in their coaching. So it's not a surprise that you would see that.
Yeah, that's great. So do you know who they are? I may know them. So
Karen Stawarki and Shanaz Brochek.
Nope, I don't know them, but they're probably better for not knowing me. Anyway, no, it's wonderful. So now this power of flexing is right for our time. So what led you to do this? What's the research behind this? Because I know you don't do anything, and I say this with respect, without a lot of research behind it. So,
well, there's like two different sort of buckets of research. One was when I started working on these ideas. I was working with my then junior colleague, who then became my dean, Scott DeRue. And
I know Scott.
We brought with us a group of 5 amazing undergrads from our org studies program at the university. And they did an independent study with us for a semester. And they went out and interviewed people they admired. At that time, we were really focused on how do you help people grow their leadership? And so a lot of those were interviews with leaders. And then I supplemented those with another 20. They did 50, and I supplemented with another 22, 24 interviews with people from all walks of life. Because in the process of writing the book, we said really what we're about is growing soft skills, growing personal and interpersonal effectiveness. And you didn't just need those to be a leader. You need those to be a good parent, a good sibling, get something done in your church or in a community group. So a lot I learned from those 72, 74 people we talked to. Right. But the other bucket is just, these are things I've been studying my whole life since I became an academic. My goal, the thing that really energizes me in life, is trying to help people be the most effective they can be in their organizational lives. So some of that is through my teaching, but some of it is through my research. So I've been researching some of the things that are in the 6 practices that make up the book since the early 80s. So a long time.
Okay, great. And I like the way you've tied this in. I mean, you have studied organizations, and you initially, with your students, explored the idea of leadership, which we think of in a work context. But you said, hey, be a better colleague. Well, again, this work, family member, friend, whatever. And I love that, because more and more our coaching, I know from many of the coaches that are watching this, while we enter into the business that they're in, so especially now in our challenging times, we're focusing on, it's the whole person. And so it's the personal stuff. And I loved your idea about the approachability. How can I be more approachable? Because that's applicable to everything. So, so good. It's good, solid stuff. So, there's always this thing, and I'm being the negative here. I'm being the devil's advocate. So, why are people, not me, of course, Sue, fearful of change? So.
Well, we all love our comfort zone. It's almost like we know the costs that go with that. And there may be some, like if I'm not approachable, I know that I'm missing out on hearing ideas, etc. But we don't know the costs associated with change. If I become more approachable, maybe there are a whole bunch of new other costs in that area that I'm not aware of, like, oh, then I have to take action on the ideas people give me, and that pushes me in ways I don't want to be pushed. So we're not aware of those costs. We also are not typically in touch with the benefits of how we are now, our comfort zone. Even though we may become aware that we need to change, we also are getting a lot of benefits of being the way we are. So if
Sure.
I'm not approachable, then, I can just be oblivious. I don't get bugged
I
by
like
people.
that.
Um,
That's great. I
yeah,
can be oblivious. I love that.
yeah. So there are benefits that keep us there. And so change is scary. We
Right.
don't know what it's going to be like if we're able to grow in a
So,
particular.
what are and I think you alluded to this, the behaviors that we can enact to become more, quote, flexible, at least to initiate that? So, what do
Yeah.
we need to start doing? So,
Well, the first one this set of ideas is based on the idea that you can learn from the experiences you're having. And that came from the leadership area.
mhm.
Basically, the research was done on people who had achieved a very high level in an organization or in a community organization or company and were considered very effective. And they asked them, how did you get to be where you are? And they said, well, 70% of what I learned from my experiences. 20% other people, mentors, role models, people I observed. 10% books and classes, which you may wonder why I wrote a book. But I wrote a book on how do you get the most out of that 70%, because there's nothing inherent in your experiences that's going to teach you. What academia did is they went out and found, well, what are the experiences that have the most to offer people? And so they found, oh, if it's challenging, if it's visible, if it crosses your personal boundaries, you're going to learn more. But there's still nothing inherent. Two people could walk through those same challenging experiences and learn different amounts. So
That really gets to the root of it. It almost seems obvious, but we see people experiencing going through things. We could even extrapolate to our pandemic. I know that many of my colleagues, some of them were, the real go-getters, or I wouldn't say that, more business focused, like what pandemic, and just keep proceeding and didn't really miss a beat. And others were, I need to reflect. I need to just think. I can't make my next step. So we all experience things differently. So before we explore the personal side, there's also the leadership aspect. And you say that this flexing will help me if I'm, promoted into a leadership role. Not me, of course, but that person. So anyway.
Well, I love working with emerging leaders. My program in our executive ed area here at Ross is called the Emerging Leaders Program. And I think these ideas are really apropos for them because they're in a role that's unfamiliar to them and feels a bit risky. There's sort of like some interpersonal risk. It may, my leading may, make my relationships more difficult with people. There's kind of an image risk, like I may do it wrong. I may not look good as I do it. And then there's an instrumental risk, like, yeah, do I really want to take the risk to say our team needs to go that direction? Because if that's wrong, I'm going to get blamed. So these people are somewhat fearful. And so this approach, the flexing approach, is really empowering. It says, try something small, try some different things, come with a mindset of learning so that you can sort of take it on in a way that allows you to grow and allows you to be seen as growing by the people you're leading. We think that we don't like leaders who are vulnerable and growing, but the data show just the opposite.
Without question. And now I think that, I love the idea of the emerging leaders that you have worked with for many years. And so when you discuss or talk to you, and what are some simple steps do you give them? I mean, obviously it's tailored to each individual, but is there an example or two that you could share with us?
Sure. Yeah. The idea behind the power of flexing is that you target an upcoming experience and you decide to go through it as a learner rather than as someone setting out to prove. and you create an intention about what you want to learn. What do you want to focus on? Essentially, you're going to go into that experience. Not only you're going to do the strategy retreat you've been assigned to lead, but you're also going to work on something about yourself, being more approachable, being a better listener, having more influence, being less of a perfectionist. There's 101 different goals you can set. And so, for my emerging leaders, a lot of times it's being more visionary. Vision is scary for the reasons I mentioned. You might look foolish if you sort of create a beautiful word picture of where you want the team to go, or you might say, we're going in this direction definitely, and the world says you should have gone in this other direction. And then you set an intention. I'm going to work on this in my team. And then you try out some of those experiments, and finally you seek feedback. You try to figure out how it's landing. How are your new ways of being landing with the group? Are they landing well, or are they missing the mark? And then some reflection is required to sort of synthesize what you learn. And then you might start again with a different goal, a new goal. You also might set the whole set of ideas down for a while. This is the power of flexing, is also flexible at the whole program level. So there might be an upcoming experience that's super important to you, and maybe you've gotten feedback that says you're failing in some way. So you want to pick it up and try to grow. Then maybe you go through a period where not much is happening, and you just kind of go back to your habits, and then you pick it up again when something important comes along where you feel you need to grow again. So there are triggers for growth, and you pick it up.
Well, I love your theme of experiment, because when one says experiment, it means I'm trying it. It doesn't mean it's written in stone. And so often in an organizational framework, if one is named as a leader, and I know you have experienced this firsthand because you've been a dean and you've led programs and all of those wonderful things at Ross School. So you know firsthand what the challenges are. And so the idea of what you're doing with experiment is you're making it safe. And I like the way you said, well, if it's not working, set it aside for a while and focus on something. So that's excellent coaching guide advice. So we do that. Now, there's something else about flexing, and I think there's two sides of it. You're saying being more responsive to my direct reports or people around me. That's positive, okay? But can we overdo it? Can we be, quote, too accommodating? Former Dean Ashford.
Yeah, I think all of leadership is striking a balance between living by sort of what you think is right and being open to the opinions of others. Leadership is an interpersonal act. It's a contact sport. And so, the opinions of others do matter. And we have research going back a long time showing that those who seek feedback, take those opinions into account, are seen as more effective by everyone, by their boss, by their peers, by their subordinates, especially if they're interested in negative feedback where they're not hitting the mark. People worry it's going to make them look weak, but it actually makes them look like they care, and that matters to people. So, but you're right. Too much where you have no core and you're just going with the winds of who talks to you last and the feedback they give you is too much. So it's really striking that balance between the two.
Right. Now, we are in this time of great upheaval, and we are slowly going back to work. Some have worked face-to-face throughout the entire pandemic, but now we seem to have struck on the hybrid model, some virtual work, some in the office. So how does flexing fit into the hybrid workplace, Sue?
Well, I think it's going to require flexing of all of us. And I think if we took an approach of flexing to that hybridness, we'd be better off, because it's very difficult. Not only just communicating, some via technology, some in person, but we also start to have like places where our mind isn't helping us, so like we start to judge those people who quote unquote aren't here, like if they're lazy and just joining by Zoom. Um, and we need to guard against some of that, as we're trying to all make our way into a world that's going to be somewhat different, probably for the long term. And we need to figure it out. And I think it's going to take flexible mindset and flexible, behaviors as we try to work that out. How do we best include people that are joining virtually, and how do we open ourselves up to wanting to do that and having that be okay is going to take flexibility as well.
Coupled with this, our hybrid workplace and new forms of work from anywhere, is the what's happening now is we call it the Great Resignation, and which is creating, people are looking for something. Maybe the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, and sometimes it is, but early research is showing, it always isn't. Something we, may have known before. So how can flexing, if I'm considering moving on, how would flexing help me, Sue? So.
Well, I do think that this flexing that's happening right now is one thing, and a lot of it, the quick and early research is showing that it's based on really feeling like in their current workplace, they're not valued and don't have a chance to grow. So, there's a message for companies in that of, perhaps adopting something like this Power of Flexing program that really invites everyone into growing in their current company. But for you as the person considering staying versus going, I loved something that Jeff Schwartz posted a few weeks back. Jeff is a retiring partner at Deloitte and something of a futurist. And he said, people change, young people these days change organizations every 3 to 5 years. So we should stop thinking of us as having a career. We're really going to have 15 chapters. And if you're going to have 15 chapters, you better have growth on your agenda, because you may be perfectly suited for your current environment, but when you get into that next environment, either now or down the line, you may be wholly unsuited or much less suited, or new things are going to come at you where you really need to flex and act differently. So the ability to grow, I think, is going to be really an important career skill for people coming up into the workforce now.
And no more does that skill acquisition or ability to flex pay more important than in what we call the gig worker, which is definitely ingrained into our economy now. So flexing complements that.
Yes, I love that you brought this up. This has been a research area for me for the last 10, 15 years, back before we called them gig workers. I was interested in people who work independently on their own. How do they create a work life that works for them? So this
You're
would
looking
be,
at one right now.
yes, this would be independent artists, novelists, all the way up to analysts, consultants, graphic designers. So some have worked this way for generations, others are new to it. And we interviewed them to really see, how do they create a good life? And, this wasn't an application of flexing, but you can see that the ability to create the conditions that enabled you to grow really mattered. And so for these people, they had to create some structure around their lives, and they did it through routines. They did it through connections to particular people, connections to a purpose that enlivened them, and also the place where they did their work, things they built into the place that made it inspiring to them and helped them focus. And so if they were able to create that sort of right structure, but not too much structure, they had a more sense of vitality in their work life as an independent worker. But we called the piece, when we published it, Agony and the Ecstasy in the Gig Economy, because it is both for most people.
Definitely.
We may bemoan organizations because they are stultifying and controlling and all these things, but working on your own is no picnic either. It has its own set of challenges.
Right. Well, let's widen the lens just a little bit because we focused on individuals. So you make in the book focus about flexing within organizations. So where's that flexing coming from? Is it from senior management or is it from the bottom up, or how do you describe that, Sue? So,
Well, first of all, any individual in an organization can pick this up and use these ideas. And I love that because most organizations, their approach to leadership development is let's hive off 15% at the top. We'll call them our high potential people. And there's even research saying that companies don't get that right. They don't even pick the right people, but they tell them, you're our high potential people. You have leadership potential. We are going to invest in you. And then the message given to 85% is, yeah, no, not you. We're not expecting leadership from you. We don't really particularly want leadership from you. And I think that's a bad message for organizations on one side. But for individuals, what this book does is it says, even if you're not one of those chosen 15%, you can grow your own leadership because, and in fact, organizations need leadership from more people in more places. And then as you move organizations, you'll be recognized more as someone worth investing in. So I think people want to grow their own leadership so they can pick up these ideas, but they don't need to do it alone, wandering in the wilderness on their own, trying to grow. Organizations could put a lot into place to make it more likely. That could start with HR departments creating, integrating the power of flexing in various programs in companies. So I use one example in the book of onboarding. So our MBA students often go out and they join companies in groups. 40 people will join from MBA programs across the world, and they go through a rotation program. You go to finance for 6 months, then operations, then marketing. So what if, in addition to learning finance, we said, pick the goal you need to work on most about yourself to be better, more personally effective. And we want you to work on that while you're in this rotation.
Great.
And so they share their goal with a small team among those 40. They go off to the finance rotation. They work on it. They get prompted to seek feedback, to reflect. They come back together as 40. They chat about what happened. Did they work on their goal? How did it go? They set a new goal or recommit to that goal with new experiments, go off into operations, et cetera. And so at the end of 2 years of these rotation programs, they not only learn finance, operations, accounting, marketing, et cetera, but they also learn more about themselves. And they bond together as a cohort, all of which will strengthen their network, strengthen their career prospects, and be a service to the organization. So I think it's easy to build these ideas into HR programs that will serve lots of people.
That's such a great idea. Well, we are racing to the end of our program, so we could go on for another hour easily. But I ask every guest for a story of grace. Do you have one that you want to share with us?
Well, for me, the writing of this book was just a set of just many examples of grace. People offering to tell me stories that put them not in a great limelight, me making a mistake and people forgiving me for whatever I did that threw us off track a little bit, people being willing to help me. I just feel blessed by all of that.
Oh, wonderful. I think I've done many of these interviews. I think your interview well over 120. And you're the first one that talked about writing a book as an act of grace. But the way you framed it, it wasn't about you. It was about how others helped you. What a wonderful story. Sue, how can people find you?
It's very easy. I'm at susanashford.com. You can order the book from there. There's a place for speaking engagements, and you can learn all about me.
That's great. Well, Susan Ashford, University of Michigan Ross School of Business, it's an honor to have you on the show. And with that, we'll close out. So.